Alara Vanya traced the shimmering Latin script on her holographic display, a faint, almost reverent hum emanating from the ancient text. A message from the past, nearly lost, yet preserved thanks to those ancient Roman presses, she murmured, the words feeling weighty, almost sacred. The date, 134 CE, glowed with a soft, persistent light. Something here doesn't align with the prevailing philosophy of Veritas Universalis. Her fingers, accustomed to the tactile nuances of the Nexus's interfaces, danced lightly over the controls, adjusting focus, cross-referencing metadata, pulling up related treatises, and consulting historical context modules. Sometimes, she felt, the global consensus was too unified. Their world was flawlessly organized, but had they lost something by discarding all the philosophical dead ends? Perhaps the true complexity of existence lay in those very detours, which they had so diligently sought to unify. Around her, the grand central atrium of the global scholarly nexus hummed with a quiet, purposeful energy. Walls of translucent data screens displayed cascading streams of information, ancient philosophical debates, real-time scientific data from orbital observatories charting exoplanetary atmospheres, legal precedents from a millennium past, and intricate astronomical models predicting the next lunar cycle with startling precision. Scholar citizens moved with an easy grace, their neural interfaces seamlessly connected to the Nexus's vast archives, a repository of human knowledge stretching back nearly 2,000 years. There were no dusty shelves of brittle parchment, nor scattered fragments of forgotten lore. Instead, a complete, unbroken digital lineage traced its roots to the very first printed pages. This wasn't merely a library, it was the planetary brain, the collective consciousness of a civilization built on the bedrock of accessible information. This was May 2025, and it was a world where the printing press had been invented in ancient Rome, not in 15th century Europe, fundamentally reshaping the trajectory of knowledge, governance, and human civilization. The genesis of a revolution. The pivotal divergence occurred around the 1st century CE. While the precise inventor remained debated, some credit a Roman engineer, Marcus Aelius Verus, inspired by the efficiency of coin minting and pottery stamps, others a secretive guild of scribes seeking to standardize legal texts. A method of durable, reusable metal type was perfected. This wasn't a sudden flash of genius in a vacuum, it was the culmination of centuries of Roman engineering prowess, their genius for organization, and a pressing need for efficient communication across a vast and expanding empire. The practical Roman mind, always seeking efficiency and order, found its ultimate expression in this breakthrough, marrying the precision of coinage with the scalability of textual reproduction. The process was iterative, involving refinements in metal alloys for durability, ink composition for clarity and permanence, and mechanisms for faster impression. Early presses were heavy, hand-operated contraptions, but even in their crude form, they promised a future unimaginable to the legions of scribes. Coupled with advancements in the processing of papyrus and early forms of plant fiber paper, this rudimentary printing press quickly revolutionized the dissemination of information. Imagine the stark contrast. Instead of legions of scribes painstakingly copying texts, a process fraught with human error and agonizing slowness, now thousands of identical copies could be produced in a fraction of the time. This massive scale of production wasn't just about speed, it was about accuracy and uniformity on a scale previously unimaginable. Imperial edicts could be published simultaneously across the vast empire, minimizing delays and misunderstandings. Legal precedents from Rome could be instantly available in the farthest provinces, ensuring a consistent application of justice. This standardization of knowledge was a powerful force for unity in a sprawling dominion. Initially embraced by the Roman state for the rapid distribution of laws, imperial decrees, and military manuals, its potential soon became evident to wealthy patrons and philosophical schools. The intellectual elite quickly grasped the implications. Copies of Seneca's letters, Pliny's natural history, and intricate legal codes could now be produced in the thousands, not hundreds, and reach distant corners of the empire with unprecedented speed. The sheer volume of identical texts meant a standardization of knowledge, reducing regional discrepancies in legal interpretation and philosophical understanding. This wasn't merely a technological leap, it was a societal transformation, planting the seeds for an informed, interconnected world that would blossom over centuries. The ability to mass-produce ideas meant that intellectual currents flowed like mighty rivers, rather than trickling streams. An empire forged by print. The Roman Empire, facing the constant challenge of governing an increasingly vast and diverse populace, found an unparalleled tool in the printing press. Laws became more uniform, their immediate dissemination fostering greater compliance and reducing regional variations. Provincial governors received identical texts, minimizing disputes arising from differing interpretations and allowing for a more cohesive imperial administration. This enhanced legal clarity and consistency significantly strengthened imperial control and cohesion, potentially delaying or mitigating the internal stresses that contributed to the decline of the Western Roman Empire in our timeline. The constant flow of information became the lifeblood of the empire, binding its disparate parts together with a sinew of shared understanding. This also allowed for more efficient tax collection, infrastructure projects, and military coordination, as instructions and reports could be accurately and swiftly exchanged. Alera, in her studies, had often come across references to early Roman legal cases where the rapid distribution of updated laws had directly impacted a verdict or prevented a rebellion, a testament to the power of print. Philosophical discourse thrived as never before. Texts from various schools, Stoic, Epicurean, Neoplatonist, were widely circulated, leading to a more intellectually vibrant and informed citizenry. Debates could be held not just in amphitheaters but across the empire, with participants referencing the exact same printed texts, fostering a shared intellectual ground. This intellectual ferment wasn't confined to the elite. Education, once largely a privilege of the wealthy or those destined for specific religious or bureaucratic roles, began to expand dramatically. Basic literacy rates soared as printed instructional texts became affordable, creating a populace capable of understanding laws, engaging with public debates, and contributing to the empire's intellectual life. This widespread literacy wasn't just about reading, it was about critical engagement, about citizens having direct access to the ideas that shaped their world, rather than relying solely on oral tradition or the interpretations of a select few. The public square extended to every villa and every market, as printed pamphlets became a common sight, fueling robust public opinion and even early forms of political commentary. Scientific observation and research accelerated dramatically. Findings and hypotheses could be shared and critiqued across the vast network of the Imperium with far greater speed. A physician in Alexandria could instantly read the latest anatomical discoveries from Rome. A cartographer in Gaul could incorporate new survey data from Hispania. This rapid exchange led to earlier technological advancements in fields like hydraulic engineering, medicine, and cartography. Imagine Roman aqueducts built with even greater precision, surgical techniques improved by disseminated knowledge of procedures in anatomy, or maps that were remarkably accurate for their time, including detailed surveys of newly conquered lands, all thanks to the rapid sharing of research and best practices. The cumulative effect was an exponential growth in scientific knowledge, building upon itself with unprecedented efficiency, laying the groundwork for a technological future centuries ahead of our own. Academic centers sprang up in cities like Antioch, Carthage, and Athens, becoming hubs for specific scientific disciplines, their research disseminated globally via print. The era of many kingdoms, a world that never knew darkness. The Dark Ages, as experienced in our history, were largely averted. When the Western Roman Empire eventually fragmented, a process that was perhaps more gradual and less severe due to better governance and communication enabled by print, the vast libraries of printed codices and scrolls remained. These weren't isolated, decaying manuscripts hidden in obscure monastic cells. They were abundant, standardized, and widely distributed across the successor states. Scholars, both Roman and from the various newly formed kingdoms, had consistent access to a continuous, abundant body of classical knowledge. The intellectual lights of antiquity never truly dimmed. Instead, they glowed brightly, adapting to new political landscapes. Monasteries, instead of merely copying texts by hand, became dynamic centers of printing and textual preservation. They maintained vast presses, churning out not only religious texts but also diligently preserving and disseminating classical learning. This meant that the intellectual foundations for later scientific inquiry were always present, leading to a more consistent progression of thought. The concept of scriptoria faded, replaced by vibrant, bustling typographia, where monks and lay scholars alike operated presses, ensuring a continuous flow of classical learning into the medieval period. This consistent intellectual environment meant that the intellectual curiosity and rigorous methods of the classical world were never truly lost. Instead of a rediscovering Aristotle centuries later, his works remained widely available, debated, and built upon, becoming fundamental components of every scholar's education. This fostered a strong culture of commentary and critique, rather than mere rote memorization. This period, which in our timeline was a fragmentation of knowledge and cultural decline, became in theirs the era of many kingdoms. While politically complex, marked by shifting alliances, dynastic struggles, and occasional conflicts, it was fundamentally an era of sustained intellectual activity. Each kingdom, though distinct in its culture and governance, benefited from the shared heritage of printed knowledge. New ideas and inventions spread relatively quickly across political boundaries, preventing the intellectual stagnation that characterized parts of our own medieval period. Architectural innovations from one kingdom could be adopted by another, agricultural techniques improved through shared printed manuals, and legal systems continued to evolve from a common Roman foundation, often adapting Roman law to local customs rather than discarding it entirely. There were no grand intellectual resets, only continuous evolution. This era fostered a resilience in knowledge, making it immune to the transient nature of political power and ensuring a continuous intellectual ascent. Faith, pluralism, and global interconnections. The rise and spread of religions were also profoundly altered. If Christianity still emerged, as in this timeline, it did, albeit in a different form, its initial spread might have been faster due to printed texts. Gospels and epistles could be distributed en masse, reaching more potential converts more quickly, spreading the word like wildfire across the empire and beyond. However, this accessibility came with a crucial counterpoint. Its dogma could also be more quickly challenged by widespread literacy and direct access to diverse interpretations. The notion of a unified, singular religious authority was perpetually tested by the availability of multiple scriptural interpretations and philosophical commentaries, often alongside the burgeoning scientific texts. Religious debates became public, scholarly affairs, not just ecclesiastical pronouncements. This often led to a more pluralistic and decentralized spiritual landscape, or to rapid, text-driven theological debates and reform movements that settled issues faster. Heresies, instead of festering in obscurity or being suppressed by fragmented authorities, could be openly debated and either suppressed through widespread counterarguments or, more often, lead to the formation of new, distinct denominations. The Great Schism, for instance, might have been less about geographical distance and more about theological differences articulated and disseminated through widely available printed tracts, debated by thousands rather than just a few high-ranking clerics. Even the concept of a holy book might have been viewed with less singular reverence, given the sheer volume of commentaries and counter-commentaries available, alongside other philosophical and scientific texts. Faith, while deeply personal for many, was also a field of vigorous, public intellectual discourse, fostering a nuanced understanding of spirituality rather than blind adherence. The early printing press fundamentally reshaped global interactions. Roman trade networks, already extensive, became conduits for intellectual exchange, transporting not just goods but ideas embodied in printed texts. As the printing press technology diffused to other great civilizations, the Han dynasty in China, the Sasanian Empire in Persia, the various Indian kingdoms, it accelerated their own scientific and philosophical progress. This diffusion wasn't always peaceful. Trade often accompanied technological espionage or deliberate intellectual exchange agreements, but the overriding trend was a global convergence of knowledge. But the outcome was a general uplift in global intellectual capacity, creating a network of highly informed civilizations that engaged with each other on more equal footing. This meant that by the time of the European Age of Exploration, if it occurred in a similar form, perhaps driven by scientific curiosity as much as resource acquisition, all major powers were already far more technologically and intellectually advanced. Instead of a stark imbalance of power, interactions likely resembled more balanced trade and cultural exchange rather than outright conquest. Imagine European explorers encountering highly developed civilizations in the Americas, not untouched empires, but societies with their own printing traditions, complex legal codes, and advanced scientific understanding that could rival their own. The very nature of colonialism, if it happened at all, would have been drastically different, perhaps becoming more akin to cultural exchange or alliances rather than subjugation. The concept of discovery itself would have been re-evaluated, understood as merely the first encounter between equally sophisticated, albeit distinct, cultures, fostering a global dialogue rather than a monologue of dominance. The global scholarly nexus of 2025. By 2025, the world was an intricately networked information society, its very fabric woven from millennia of recorded thought. The Global Scholarly Nexus, a vast, decentralized organization, managed the planetary digital archives, claiming direct lineage from the earliest Roman imperial presses. Its architecture reflected its purpose: open, transparent, and endlessly connected. The grand central atrium, with its translucent data screens, was a symbolic heart, but the Nexus was a truly global network, with nodes in every major intellectual center, all feeding into and drawing from the planetary digital repository. Its servers, quantum encrypted and self-healing, hummed with the collective wisdom of 2 millennia, accessible from any point on Earth. Education was universal and profoundly nuanced, emphasizing critical thinking and the analysis of vast, often contradictory, bodies of knowledge. Children from a young age were taught not just to read, but to contextualize, to cross-reference, and to discern patterns in massive datasets. They learned not just facts, but the history of those facts, the debates that shaped them, and the competing theories that challenged them. This rigorous intellectual training, beginning in early childhood, fostered a deeply inquisitive and critically astute global populace. Concepts of intellectual property were ancient and deeply embedded in global law, having evolved over 2,000 years of dealing with mass-produced texts. Early Roman legal precedents, refined through the era of many kingdoms, and subsequent global intellectual exchanges, formed the bedrock of complex, universally recognized copyright and attribution systems. This wasn't merely about ownership, it was about the integrity of knowledge itself, ensuring that credit was given where due and that original thought was celebrated, preventing plagiarism on a mass scale. Governance, whether by elected councils or enlightened monarchies, relied heavily on informed public discourse, facilitated by ubiquitous data access and historical literacy. Citizens were expected to engage with the nuances of policy, drawing upon millennia of historical precedent available at their fingertips. Plebiscites and parliamentary debates were often preceded by days or weeks of intense public information campaigns, where different sides presented their arguments, backed by exhaustive data, all accessible to everyone via personal interfaces. There was a deep-seated trust in the informed citizen, a legacy of that initial Roman ideal of widespread literacy. Democracy, where it flourished, was not a matter of charisma, but of verifiable knowledge and well-reasoned argument, leading to a more stable and responsive political landscape. Even monarchies were often advised by councils of scholars and data analysts, their decisions informed by the vast Nexus archives. Alara's discovery. Alara Vanya, a lead knowledge archivist for the Global Scholarly Nexus, sat in her workstation within the cavernous Alexandria archives. The air, though recycled and pure, seemed to carry the faint, ghost-like scent of ancient paper and ink, a subtle reminder of the physical origins of their digital world. Her holographic display projected a timeline of textual evolution, a shimmering river of knowledge tracing the concept of veritas universalis, a universal truth, from its first recorded mentions in early Roman philosophical schools, through the era of many kingdoms, to the present, global consensus era. The timeline was a living document, constantly updated by the Nexus's AI and human teams, mapping the ebb and flow of ideas across centuries, charting the birth, evolution, and sometimes, the quiet disappearance of intellectual movements. Her current task was to cross-reference an obscure, early printed commentary from a peripheral Roman province, dated 134 CE, with the mainstream philosophical interpretations of Veritas Universalis. This particular commentary, from a certain Lucius Quintus of Massilia, suggested a more fluid, subjective interpretation of truth, contrasting sharply with the dominant, more rigid, objective definitions that permeated later philosophical schools and eventually became foundational to the global consensus. It was a philosophical outlier, a quiet rebellion against the prevailing intellectual tides, almost a whisper in the grand symphony of established thought. Alara had chosen this particular text because she'd always felt a subtle unease with the absolute certainty of the global consensus. Its neatness, its perfect order, sometimes felt too simple for the messy reality of human experience. As Alara delved deeper, she felt a quiet kinship with Quintus. Lucius Quintus, he was a solitary voice, much like many of us who seek truth beyond approved dogmas. Only he was fortunate enough that his words survived. In her world, such philosophical dead ends weren't simply lost to the void. They were preserved, meticulously catalogued, and made accessible. It was a testament to the Nexus's core mission, that every idea, however obscure, held potential value, a thread in the grand tapestry of human thought that might yet hold unforeseen patterns. This wasn't just about preserving dominant narratives, it was about honoring the entire intellectual journey of humanity, including its detours and forgotten paths. She zoomed into the ancient Latin text, its perfectly reproduced type sharp and clear on the screen, a testament to the early Roman presses. The precision of the ancient type, even after 2 millennia, was astonishing. "It's a subtle but significant divergence," she murmured, activating an AI comparative analysis. The AI, a neural network trained on the entirety of human philosophical discourse, began highlighting connections, drawing subtle lines between Quintus's work and other, equally obscure, forgotten commentaries. Lucius argues that veritas is not a fixed construct, but a dynamic, evolving understanding shaped by individual perception and societal context. This idea about subjective truth, it would have simply vanished, dissolved into oblivion, had it not been for those first presses. In our era of many kingdoms, such deviations were often challenged fiercely, but the sheer volume of printed material made them too numerous to truly erase. They persisted in the quiet corners of libraries, waiting for an age like ours to rediscover them. A subtle current ran down Alara's spine as the AI highlighted similar fleeting mentions in other obscure, early printed treatises that never gained mainstream traction. Her hands trembled slightly. This wasn't just mentions, this was a shimmering trace of an entire underground stream of thought, one that had once flowed beneath the surface of official philosophy. She felt not just scientific interest, but an almost reverent fear at the scale of what had been nearly lost, and what could now be found again. This changes everything, she thought, her heart pounding. It wasn't just a forgotten voice, it was an idea that could shake the very foundations of their consensus. Veritas Universalis, as understood for centuries, rested on an objective, unchanging truth. But Lucius Quintus proposed something else, a dangerously fluid, subjective understanding. What would happen if this thought came to light again? Suddenly, a voice, calm and modulated, echoed from a nearby workstation. "Finding any forgotten luminaries, Alara?" It was Kale, a fellow archivist specializing in ancient legal codes, his neural interface glowing faintly as he paused his own work, probably on some intricate dispute from the Constantinian period or a pre-imperial trade agreement. Alara straightened, her gaze becoming resolute. "Perhaps. A certain Lucius Quintus from Massilia. He thought truth was more fluid than our consensus would suggest. It's fascinating how many threads were nearly cut from the tapestry of thought, only for the presses to stitch them back in." She gestured to the shimmering display, allowing Kale a glimpse of the illuminated connections. The holographic projections danced between them, a shared moment of discovery, a whisper of a shared secret. Kale nodded, his eyes reflecting the soft blue light of her screen, a flicker of recognition in their depths. The beauty of the unbroken lineage. Every whisper preserved, every doubt recorded. Makes you wonder what other truths we're still uncovering from the margins, doesn't it? What other foundations might shift if we pull hard enough on one of those threads? He paused, then added, "It's why the Nexus exists, isn't it? To not just preserve, but to understand. To give voice to the voiceless, even across millennia." Alara looked back at her display, her fingers hovering over the glowing controls. The ramifications of this discovery were immense. It would force a reevaluation, a public discourse that could be unsettling, even disruptive. But it was necessary. The Nexus had always been about truth, in all its forms. Alara straightened, her gaze now fixed on the core interface. "We need to conduct a full analysis of this underground current, Kale," she said, her voice clear and firm. She reached out, her hand decisively pressing the Request Full Disclosure Analysis button, sending the data on Lucius Quintus and his rediscovered philosophical network up the chain of command. "And I think," she continued, looking out at the quiet, purposeful hum of the Nexus, the endless data streams flowing across the walls like digital waterfalls, "it's time to present this discovery at the highest level of the consensus. Some threads of the tapestry, perhaps, need to be rewoven. The global scholarly nexus would have to grapple with a truth more complex than it had allowed itself to believe, a testament to the enduring power of ink and type, and the unexpected voices it had preserved through 2 millennia.